Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I'm Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us. Where am I at? Well, I'm at Forged Relations right here in beautiful Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And right over there is a Gundy Award that I hear I might be beginning to pick up later on. But I'll tell you why we're here. We're here doing some work for Right to Bear. But when I'm out here in beautiful South Carolina, and I got to tell you, South Carolina, you got a fantastic state. I have enjoyed every minute I've been out here so far. But I want to talk to you about a very, very disturbing story that actually comes from this state, but involves our favorite three-letter agency, of course, that is the ATF. What have they done now? Well, I'll tell you in just a moment. So today, let's spend a few minutes and let's talk about the man the ATF tried to put away forever, but he was innocent. Okay, before we get going too far down the road we're going down, proud to announce that this video is being brought to you by Right to Bear. That's right, legal protection for self-protection. Listen, good lawyers aren't cheap, cheap lawyers aren't good. You're not truly prepared unless you have Right to Bear back you. You will always get an attorney-answered hotline, so you will always have a confidential phone call. There are no cap limits for either civil or criminal defense. This covers all forms of self-defense. So from a fist to a firearm, from a fat lip to a dead body, you are covered, and you will have some of the nation's most passionate 2A attorneys in your corner fighting for you. And right now, if you visit my friends at protectwithbear.com and you use the promo code WGL, you will receive 10% off. Listen, you need to protect yourself so that you can protect them. Visit my good friends at protectwithbear.com. Okay, like I say, coming to you from Forged Relations right here in beautiful South Carolina. We're going to put all of their information down in the description box. If you don't know about all the incredible work that Forged Relations is doing and some of the fantastic work they might be able to do for you, you should check them out. I'm going to talk to you about an incredibly disturbing story involving our favorite three-letter agency, the ATF, and a South Carolina man. The story involves a gentleman named Bryan Montiea Wilson, a 33-year-old African-American gentleman who lives in West Columbia, South Carolina. Now, this whole ordeal began the morning of December 13, 2023. You see, Mr. Wilson, like every other weekday, just went to his job to do his work like he always does. Mr. Wilson's never been in trouble before for anything. He lives a good, clean, healthy lifestyle, hardworking American. But that morning, a bunch of ATF agents showed up at his place of employment. Why? Well, to place him under arrest. And not only did they place him under arrest, I want you to understand that they handcuffed him and then paraded him out of his place of employment in front of all the employees. The ATF told Mr. Wilson that they actually had a warrant for his arrest. They handcuffed him, they stuffed him, they sent him down to detention where he was booked and then arraigned. Turns out a grand jury just a few days earlier had returned an 8-count indictment. 8 counts. Oh my God, what were they? Well, there was 5 counts of delivery of controlled substances, each and every time the allegation being that Mr. Wilson had sold methamphetamine. There were 3 more counts that accused Mr. Wilson of being in possession of a firearm in furtherance of a narcotics deal. A total of 8 counts. Mr. Wilson was looking at up to 115 years in prison and millions of dollars in fines. He was brought before a federal magistrate, he was read the indictment, and he had to enter pleas to all of those charges. Fortunately, Mr. Wilson and his federal public defender, well, they entered not guilty pleas. Now, this is where things get a little fuzzy, and we're going to actually reach out to the attorney, see if we can get them on the channel and see if we can get a little bit more information. But I got to tell you, Mr. Wilson's federal public defender absolutely should receive a medal for what happened, because they convinced the U.S. attorney to keep Mr. Wilson at the courthouse for a period of time while they could look into this. Mr. Wilson had been adamant that he was absolutely innocent, that they had the wrong guy. And there must have been something in that, because I've heard that story from a bunch of clients also, but something convinced this public defender, this attorney, to explore that further. But how could they possibly have the wrong guy? I mean, after all, ATF had listed Bryan Montiea Wilson as the individual who had done all this. They had a description of him, although it did describe probably another million people in the state of South Carolina. They had a date of birth, and they had 2 officers working for the Columbia Police Department working on a task force with the ATF, so deputized by the ATF. Two separate officers willing to sign affidavits under penalty of perjury that said they had in fact purchased narcotics from Mr. Wilson and were aware that he had been armed. But here's the problem. Here's the big problem for everybody, including Mr. Wilson. Yeah, you see, the ATF had the wrong guy. I don't know who the ATF bought the drugs from, and I don't know who was armed when they sold them the drugs on not one, not two, but 5 separate occasions. I don't know where the ATF got their information. I don't know where the ATF got their description, and I'm not even sure what the ATF did to conduct a thorough investigation here. But somehow or another, they ended up arresting Bryan Montiea Wilson for crimes that he never committed. Now, that same day, after Mr. Wilson's attorney was able to convince the U.S. attorneys that charges needed to be dropped, the U.S. attorney actually filed a motion to dismiss the charges in the interest of justice. And this is important. Actually dismiss the charges with prejudice, which means that the prosecution is absolutely 100% incapable of ever refiling those charges. As a matter of fact, the order signed by the U.S. attorney read as follows. Further review of the case reveals that the interest of justice would best be served by a dismissal of the pending charges as opposed to further prosecution. Based on the foregoing, the government respectfully requests that the court dismiss the pending charges against defendant Bryan Montiea Wilson. And of course, the interest of justice being that even this United States attorney did not want to prosecute an innocent man. Now, there's been a lot of questions asked of Assistant U.S. Attorney Elizabeth Major about this case, who oversaw the prosecution of this case. She has been shockingly quiet about the whole thing, but Mr. Wilson is not going to stay quiet about this anymore, because Mr. Wilson has now filed suit against the federal government for deprivation of constitutional rights. For those of you who geek out on the channel all the time, you will know that we have a federal statute, 42 United States Code, Section 1983, that says that you can sue the United States government if you are deprived of your constitutional rights while under the color of state or federal law. This case is now filed in the United States District Court for South Carolina. The complaint was just filed. We're going to link it up down below so that you can see the allegations. Interestingly, the complaint itself is also a little silent on what happened during that window of time after Mr. Wilson was arraigned and before the public defender was able to actually convince the United States attorney that they had the wrong guy. And so if anybody has information, if you are Mr. Wilson's public defender or the attorney currently representing him on the civil suit, give us a call here at Washington Gun Law. We would love to get more information. But I want you to remember that this now continues a very long and disturbing pattern of the ATF absolutely abusing any shred of authority that it has. Now, we can go back in our history books and we can talk about Ruby Ridge. We can go back in our history books and we can talk about Waco. We don't have to go too far back in our history books, however, to figure out what happened to Bryan Malinowski. We know what happened to them, and we know exactly what the ATF did in order to execute this person. But now we have a situation in which two law enforcement officers, deputized by the ATF, wrote under the penalty of perjury in declarations that they have observed an individual commit 8 separate crimes. And yet, we know for a fact that neither agent ever saw Mr. Wilson do any of this. Listen, we're going to go ahead and carefully follow this case. I don't think this is the end of it at all. We are very interested to see where this civil suit is going. If Mr. Wilson's attorney wants to reach out and talk to us here on the channel, we'd love to have you. Listen, if you guys got any ideas about any videos we should be doing, go ahead and click on that link right there, because some of the best ideas we ever had weren't really our ideas to begin with. If you got any questions about this issue or anything else related to what's left of our Second Amendment rights, you guys should know how to get a hold of Washington Gun Law by now. If you don't, that's okay. That information is down there in the description box. And then finally, let's everyone remember that part of being the lawful and responsible gun owner, like we talk about all the time here, is to know what the law is in every situation, how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. From Forged Relations here in beautiful Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, thanks for watching and stay safe.